Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Eric Jacobs. I will be your host today for this episode of Public Sector on Air. Joining me today is Trey Vance. He's leading up some of our hyperscale partner efforts, but we're going to talk about OpenShift Managed. Trey, your camera disappeared. I don't know if that was related to the issue that we had before, but go ahead and say hello and maybe introduce yourself real quick.
Hey, good morning, afternoon, or wherever you are. My name is Trey Vance, and I am in the North American public sector, and I lead some efforts around hyperscale partners and working with the Red Hat portfolio on those partners. So in particular, I came from the AWS world, and I'm working very closely with the AWS team. So really glad to be here. Happy to be on the call, Eric.
Yeah. So like I said, we're going to talk about some of our managed OpenShift services. But Trey, you've got some slides that you're going to go through. We're going to try not to just do like total boring slide death presentation today. I'm going to try to make it interactive. We're watching the chats. So by all means, if you have questions, hi, Walid. Good to see you, man. He's probably our most prolific viewer. But anyway, so yeah, if you got questions, please by all means hit us up, let us know. So I will let you take over, Trey, and I will try to interrupt you as much as possible.
Okay, so hopefully you can see me because I like to use a lot of hand
I fixed
motions.
it.
Okay,
It was
awesome.
all on me. User
All
error.
right, yeah, no worries. That's why we do these things. But yeah, so we're definitely not going to do like a ton of slideware. We'd love to have the good conversation about managed services. But when you start thinking about managed services, what are we providing, right? So OpenShift itself is just more than just Kubernetes. It's actually a way to be able to develop, do modern development in such a way that, yes, I might be built on Kubernetes, but I have the extended experience of the entire open source community, right? And it's not just software, a Red Hat, a RHEL subscription, or even an OpenShift subscription means a lot more than that. It means that I'm able to very quickly get things up and running, especially in the managed service. And it's just getting a lot of things, off of my plate. Like a lot of people, a lot of organizations have even more to do, especially now that everyone is either working from home like we are, or they're trying to do some things that they had a collaborative environment in an office place that's been distributed now. So there's a lot more that people are trying to do in a much more compressed nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, can you go back a slide real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
There was something there that I actually want to ask a question about. So under more than managed, right? And if you're going to talk about this later, by all means, we can shelve it. But you talk about managing the full stack, not just the Kubernetes control plane. So I mean, what does that really mean? Like, what it sounds like OpenShift gives you something that's not just Kubernetes, which is like the most leadingest question ever. Because obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, because anybody that's ever been on the stream before knows that OpenShift is more than Kubernetes. But maybe there are some people, this is their first stream with us, so
yeah.
What's some of that added stuff?
Well, and the managed OpenShift, right? And
That
we'll
too,
get into
yeah.
what those are. But the managed OpenShift is, the cloud infrastructure. It's the Kubernetes engine. It's the application services that are on top. So, more than managed in that case means, everything that you need, whether that's pipelines, whether that's logging and management, security. Some of those are some of the things that are built in. Another thing that we built in is, a longer term life cycle. So I don't have to figure out how to support the build process, and if that's going to change over time. And my deployment is a different methodology, right? Like all of that stuff is included. So that's a curated experience.
Yeah.
And
So
that's a lot different.
Sure. So when you're talking about builds and pipelines and stuff, you're talking about the native features of OpenShift as opposed to using star KS from a cloud vendor and then having to integrate either that cloud's particular pipeline system or build system or integrate your own build system or whatever. These are value-added things that come with the OpenShift platform that you're managing from an operational perspective for the customer, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely that, right? Like if I had to think about, okay, well, I got to go get, the star, Kubernetes engine, and then I got to have a build process. So it's code this and code that to deploy. I have to coordinate all of that stuff, and that takes me out of my project, right? So my project might be that I need to get my app up and running. I need there to be certain guidelines, and I need it to be dependable and repeatable. I can do that in an OpenShift environment, whereas I have to build and put all that stuff together in a CSP environment. So it's like a lot different. It allows me to get focused on my work and building the best application I can and building it out of the best solution that's tested and meant to work together, as opposed to me cobbling a bunch of stuff together and hoping for the best and hoping it doesn't change immediately.
Yeah, right. Or hoping that an upgrade to the Kubernetes control plane doesn't blow up all the integrations that you just built.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it like car parts, right? Like a lot of organizations have, a catalog of parts, but you don't know if that stuff is actually going to work together. Or if I get the car over 90 and there are no cops around, that it's going to do what I think it's going to do. Like it might be the best piece and part, but when I put it with the other pieces and parts, is it going to do what I need it to do?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what this is. This is what this is doing.
Cool. And so you mentioned a little bit like, some of the setup or operations or whatever. I mean, and again, if this is somewhere else in the slides or what have you, be sure to let me know. But what a lot of times, like traditional question from a customer, right? You go to them and you're like, hey, we have this awesome, managed thing that we want to do for you. And the first question they ask is like, oh, so I should fire all my admins? And so, I'm pretty sure that's not what we're saying here, but like, what's the difference between what those admins might be doing today? Do they still have functions that they need to do, in a managed hosted OpenShift environment? Talk to me a little bit.
Absolutely. There's, when you're making this kind of shift into a managed solution, there's still work. There's certain people who have expertise in policy and security. Those skills translate into a managed service. What they don't have to do is manage the minutia of it. They don't have to worry about managing point releases or system uptime. Instead, they can be architecting, where the system is going. So they can they can go along with the journey into the cloud, into a managed service. And instead of having to do the basic blocking and tackling, they actually can go out there and, acquire new business for the organization, or transform some of the processes that they were never able to get around to because they were firefighting. So this is really taking them out of firefighting mode and allowing them to get into some of the value adds that were always on the list, but the other things were too complex.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I guess I'll shut up for a minute and let you get back to it.
All good, man. All good. But these are some of the things that, just at a very high level, any organization that if they're pulling down a vanilla, so to speak, implementation of Kubernetes, these are all the things that they have to do, right? So they've got to install it somewhere, whether that's in the cloud, on-prem, or on a boat somewhere. They've got to be able to deploy new iterations of software with it. They've got to be able to harden it. And some of these are just the things that we take into consideration when we're building OpenShift. So not only just the OpenShift container platform itself, but the managed service. Like the managed service allows us to take care of a great number of these things and iterate on your behalf. And the customer is then able to use this as the springboard to do the things that they really wanted to get done.
Yeah. So when you look at this picture to a certain extent, like if we take StarKS, the cloud provider native Kubernetes in consideration, like where, if you were to draw a line or sort of like a, kind of a box around what you get from the vendor, what do you get from the cloud, and then where do we kind of come in? It seems like maybe it's a lot of it kind of interstitched. We give you some things, they give you some things.
Yeah, I always think of it like layers, right? So I'm mixing metaphors here. I started talking about cars, and now we're talking about baking. I mean, anything to keep people entertained. But essentially, like, the cloud provider is providing something, right? So they're providing the infrastructure.
Mhm.
They're providing reliability and technology. Like, when I think about this running in a cloud, like, they have solved the performance of compute infrastructure problem. So you don't have to go out and acquire infrastructure. You can do an API call to get that infrastructure, and you only pay for what you consume. So capacity on demand, pay as you go, they've got that covered. What we do next is we provide, a platform, and that platform is extensible and can interconnect with things that you may be doing on-prem, things that you're doing with other cloud services, and allows you to build those modern applications with a trusted source. So those are just like some of the ways to kind of get started. So it allows you to not have to build everything, and really get on with the business that you had in mind. So it takes you that much closer.
Yeah. And so I think maybe the next slide covers this a little bit, but you talk about, like, you don't have to build and integrate it. But you know what, I'm going to let you do this one. And then I think there's going to be one at some point where the question that I want to ask is going to make more sense.
No worries. So one of the biggest things with a managed service is this idea of flexibility, right? So I don't have to manage every piece and part. I get to consume the things that I think are of value, and then I can build the things that aren't included in the platform. So I can build the things that are specific to my application, or I might be able to build an integration into an existing work stream. And that all provides me a very quick time to value, right? So I don't have to go and procure each component and wait. There's not a lot of waiting going on. I can actually build something that's going to be able to flex or be elastic and scale up when my business needs it, and it scales down when I don't need it. So that allows me more operational efficiency, right? So, you no longer really have to design for peak. And that's a very powerful thing, because one of two things happens when you design for peak. You get it wrong on the high side.
Yeah,
and
you're either over or under, right?
Yeah, it's like that gym membership that I have, especially now, where not only was I not using it anyway, but I didn't have any plans to, but I still have to pay for it.
Right. Yeah. Now you don't want to go because you don't want to get sick, but before you didn't want to go because you didn't want to go. So.
Right. Yeah. And so that's one way. And then the other one is like, well, what if I used it all the time? Like I did a few years ago, right? What if I used my gym membership like every day?
You would be their least favorite customer because they want you to sign up and then never show up.
Yeah. Or like, I want to do CrossFit. My gym doesn't have CrossFit. It's like, well, okay. And it's the same thing with the cloud, right? Like I can design something that I think is going to meet my business, but then the CEO or the CTO goes out there and creates a new line of business. And all of a sudden I'm in this new business that I was not aware of before, and I can't scale any further. So I'm bound. All my business opportunities then are bound based on a choice that I made without all the information. But a managed service and cloud, by extension, allows you to have that fluidity and that flexibility.
So you're saying pay as you go, and you're talking about fluidity and flexibility. So, I'm the operations tech marketing guy. So when I hear those things, I'm thinking about like cluster autoscaler, machine sets, like what, do we have it set up in a way where, that new pod that comes in, that means we need another node, that happens automatically, or do I have to call Red Hat and, be, hey, can you give me more? Like how does that work?
So that's the really cool thing about it. And you'll see a little bit later, we've got managed services across.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll get managed services across all the different types of cloud providers. And we'll have that dimension of being able to automatically scale. So that's going to be a very powerful thing for companies. They're not, calling us to be able to scale out to meet their business.
So there's a minimum entry fee to get in the door, so to speak. But then, after that, it's pretty much scale up. We scale up with you. You get rid of stuff. We scale down with you. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, that's right. And that's exactly it. And one of our newest entries is on a company that people may have heard of before.
Just maybe.
Just maybe. But we have this continuum, right? Like the idea of going from self-managed into a dedicated solution that is something that we sell to a more or less joint solution with Amazon. So the Amazon Red Hat Openshift is something that's been announced, that's going to be in tech preview and will roll out. So this is going to be basically the same kind of solution as OpenShift Dedicated, which is a managed service that we have, but it's going to be for the AWS customer. So that customer that's decided, hey, I'm going to Amazon, we have two solutions for that.
Yeah. So on the, I use that word so a lot. It's my spacer word. And then there's another space word for the Amazon Red Hat OpenShift. Is that like you go to console.aws and there's a button somewhere that you click that makes me OpenShift?
That's, yeah. When it launches, that's what it'll be.
Well, yeah.
So
sorry.
Yeah, it'll be in the Amazon console. So that'll actually be a first for Amazon to have any third-party solutions in there. So it says a lot about Red Hat, the portfolio that we have, as well as our expertise in building open hybrid solutions.
Yeah. I don't want to put words in Amazon's mouth, but if they felt that AKS was the only valid solution, they wouldn't have done this partnership, right? And again, I'm taking my red hat off and sort of looking at that speculatively. Clearly there was enough value. It appears to me that there was enough value in that offering, a OpenShift button, so to speak.
And I would say
that they decided that they wanted to offer it, right?
Absolutely. I would say that there are customers that want an open hybrid solution, and they want to be able to put it where they believe their organization operates best. And if that's Amazon, then they want to be on AWS. They want to be able to use those services, and they want to be able to use OpenShift as well. And they want to be able to, I think about this from an experience. If I'm building an application and I want to build that application based on open source technology, or I want to build an application that is portable across the hybrid cloud, then this is what I would look towards. I'd look towards Red Hat to have that kind of leadership and opinionated guidance to be able to go from on-prem today to the edge. I want to be able to go into the cloud, and I want to be able to do the same things in all of those places. I don't want to have to figure out the language of one place versus another. I want to be able to do this in an open and transparent way.
Yeah, and it's going to sound a little bit like FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But to a certain extent, you've got regulatory compliance and other issues that say, you can't have an outage of your service for whatever reason, right? Especially in things like banking, healthcare, et cetera. And so, nobody's perfect. Red Hat's not perfect. The cloud providers aren't perfect. Outages happen or what have you. And so, again, sort of circling backwards to, well, like, what does OpenShift give me on top of the native Kubernetes from a cloud vendor? Well, if you buy into the OpenShift methodology of doing things, whether that's deploying your apps, building your apps, whatever, it doesn't matter where OpenShift is. It's all the same. So from an operational perspective, like we were talking about, tying it back to that too, the admins still have to understand. It's almost like more application operations, right? Those folks need to understand, okay, what does it mean to run our services on top of OpenShift? And how do we make sure that no matter where that OpenShift is, that we do, oh man, there you go, leading the witness again. I swear, everybody, I have not seen this deck before. This is really, honestly, Boy Scouts promise, like, this is the first time I've seen this deck. So I've seen
Johnny Carson used to do this thing that he would hold an envelope or something to his head and would be like, oh,
Yeah, it's like one of those magic shows where you pull out the sealed deck of cards and there's your card, and it's like, I swear I didn't.
That's right.
So what is it? This addressing what I was talking about, kind of?
It's the beginning of it, right? So where can I run OpenShift? Well, everywhere you have compute, essentially, right? So if you're talking about AWS or Microsoft Azure, Google platform, IBM, and on-prem as well, right? I can run OpenShift everywhere. So if I'm building a next generation or a modern application, pipeline, and I want to build using tools that I can use anywhere, then I would use OpenShift. So even going back to the beginning of the very idea of being able to port workloads between clouds. Maybe I want to use something like BigQuery, right, which is a Google thing, or maybe I want to use Redshift, which is an AWS thing, or I want to use Azure DevOps pipelines. If I'm doing that through OpenShift, I can do all of those things and I can do them together. And so I have the things that will allow me as an organization to be more adaptable to a changing technology landscape.
Okay. We got two viewer questions. One is about some of the ecosystem services, which is kind of mostly related to operators. So like what, are there any restrictions to things that can run on top of dedicated or managed? Broadly speaking, you don't have to go into
Right.
specific examples. And then there was another question about government / non-public, I'll use the term, cloud options. So, GovCloud, C2S, all
Sure.
these other interesting things.
Yeah.
Take those in any order.
So I'll take the first and the second. The idea of Operator Hub that's running in OpenShift container platform would be true as well inside of the managed service. So OpenShift is going to be OpenShift is OpenShift. And that gives you, great transparency, but also the ability to make, design choices. So if I'm using something from the Red Hat partner ecosystem, whether it's a certified container, a universal base image, or an operator, I can be consistent in the deployment of that. Or if I'm an organization that's building one of those, I know that I can build that and have a very broad distribution for my technology. So not to be agnostic per se, but when you build things in an open, transparent, and portable way, then you get the most bang for your buck.
Sure.
OpenShift is not a walled garden. It's very transparent in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the second question was around other regions, right? So the
quote
hyperscale
unquote non-public regions.
Yeah. So the hyperscale providers have, and this is public knowledge, so I'm not sharing anything.
Yeah, it's not confidential.
But there's not going to be a knock at my door probably for saying that. But they have other regions where they do compute, and it's not just commercial US East 1 or whatever. And we operate in those environments as well to a varying degree, right? So we operate anywhere that there could be compute. So that's essentially the answer to that. Is that that we made a choice a long time ago to be an open and hybrid company, and so that's borne out in the fact that we exist in all those different places.
Yeah, that's great. I know a lot of the government organizations can run in the cloud, but they must run in those non-public cloud provider regions, if you will. And so
there's a world of compliance and security.
Not just public sector too. So
But
healthcare, etc.
Yeah, the nice thing about that is you have highly regulated industries that are using Red Hat's portfolio products, and then you have highly regulated industries. You have government entities. I heard it said that we were in other places outside of the round earth that we have. So we'll just say that as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, so we're working with those agencies.
Sure. On this topic of non-public and regulatory and agency and all these other things, does dedicated or any of these managed services, do they carry any of those regulatory or compliance certifications right now? Is there a roadmap for others? What's the story there?
Yeah, so there are a number. Think about things like SOC. Those are things that
like what? I'm sorry.
SOC, SOC.
SOC, got it.
Yeah, so SOC compliance, There are a number of compliance programs that are on the roadmap, but just to get started, we do inherit in some cases from the provider that we're on. So you as a customer building a compliant application may be able to get a leg up by, instead of running it in your own data center and you have to comply with everything from physical security all the way through the compliance program, you can do what's known as inherited and shared responsibilities for, or shared controls for compliance. Right. So compliance is a whole thing in and of itself. I do come from that background, and I got to just be careful that I don't start talking about that, because a week later we'll still be here talking about compliance.
Yeah, but I think people want to know that just because they are subject to something like PCI or FISMA or whatever, that they can consider an option like this either right now, depending on the specific certification, or somewhere in the near future. I know that we've got some certification efforts, approvals type things that are underway with some third-party security vendors. So if you can talk about them, great. If not, that's fine too.
Yeah, so I'm not at liberty to talk about those in extensive detail, but I will say that there are some public efforts that we have. So again, this is kind of going back to us as a transparent and open organization. We have a government site that's our ATO pathways, right? So we have some efforts that we're documenting that are being documented out in the public. So when we talk about stuff like PCI, you talk about things like FedRAMP, those specific compliance programs are things that are all based on a national standard. So the NIST 853. So especially for public sector organizations, right? Those are things that are important. And we're actually documenting a great number of our products, whether that's Ansible automation, whether that's RHEL itself, OpenShift, OpenStack, a lot of that stuff. Some of the efforts are being shown through a GitHub repo and that website as well.
Yeah, so I see some questions from Wallet about abstracting the public cloud services that OpenShift integrates with, but I don't totally understand them. So Wallet, please, if you could elaborate a little bit, that'd be great. Yeah, and then on the certification security front, to a certain extent, there's only so much that Red Hat can do when we provide you a platform. The same holds true for the hyperscaler natively, right? If you deploy an app in a non-compliant way, there are certain things that OpenShift can do to prevent it, but for the most part, we can't prevent everything, right? So if you put those two pods in the same place and you did bad things with SSL or whatever, the jig is up, right? OpenShift isn't magic. It's magic about many things, but it's not magic about everything.
There's a lot of magic to it, but I think about if I were to use FedRAMP as an example, I have to accredit the system, which includes any applications that run in the system, in those bounds. Does the cloud provider help you in doing that? Yes, because there are certain things that the cloud provider is doing for you. You may not have someone that badges in and out of a data center, but the cloud provider does that. And so they have an attestation towards that. I think about the platform like OpenShift. If I build on top of OpenShift, there may be things that I'm doing with logins and logging and security by default that help to get that application even that much further. And then I might be left with a subset of controls that are specific to my application and that environment that I have to do. So maybe if there's 360 controls between the cloud provider and the platform, I might treat 300 of them, leaving me with 60. But in the broadest sense, that's how that works.
Got it. Okay. So Wallet's question is more about why with OpenShift managed services, why would I use the built-in logging when the cloud provider potentially already provides logging? But it's weird. His question is sort of answering his own question. I think what we do, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? We have a logging stack that we provide with OpenShift, and so that logging stack is deployed anywhere that a managed service is used. I don't know today that we're doing anything natively on like cross cluster aggregation of those logs, but maybe that's something that's on the roadmap. I'm not sure, and I don't want to get too far off the beaten path.
Yeah, and I wouldn't go too deep into that either. But what I would say is, like, I don't think that it's with a managed solution, it's not an either or. It's that we offer something that's going to be universally accessible, meaning that that same solution is going to work. The logging solution is going to be the same on Azure as it is on AWS, as it is on GCP, whereas CloudTrail and CloudWatch events, for example, are specific to AWS. So if I'm using something that's specific to a platform, then it's not something that's going to be readily accessible somewhere else. I have to redo the engineering effort in order to use that from a different provider. This allows you hybridity or a hybrid nature, I should say.
Yeah. I think I've interrupted you enough, at least on this slide.
Oh yeah, no, you're good. So this is another way, like some people are visual and some people like verbal explanations of things, and some people like hand wavy things. But this is an example of if I'm using OpenShift container platform. So real quick, the managed service is built on the container platform. So what a customer may self-manage, they can also use as a managed service where we'll take care of even more of it. But as I look at this, this is a OpenShift container platform running on an abstracted cloud. So if it's self-directed, I'm responsible for DNS and IPs and whether it's public or private or the load balancer, all the stuff underneath. I still have to manage all of that, right? So I have responsibilities for creating the users and the life cycle of everything, including the patching, and worrying about, if it's on AWS, EC2 instances and all that other good stuff. When I'm using a managed service, the responsibilities are still shared, but now Red Hat's managing the clusters, they're managing the patch levels, securing those nodes, and all of that stuff, leaving you with your data and how you manage and manipulate your data, and your authentication, like how you connect to other systems. And those are some things that just you'll always have, and you'll always have control of your data, but this abstracts all of the other stuff. And I think the difference between this managed service and say a cloud provider service is that you have visibility. Even though you don't control these other things, you still have visibility into how that's being done.
Yeah, so we don't hide it from you.
Yeah, so it's not a black box, right? Like, right. If I use a cloud service, I'm not really sure how that works. That's not a positive or negative. That just is a thing. But with OpenShift and the managed service, you have visibility into all those things. You don't have the responsibility for it.
Got it. Yeah. So from a cluster management-y platform perspective, with OpenShift managed on OpenShift 4, if you, as in quote unquote administrator, were to log in, you would see how many nodes there were that were running, and you could see where the pods are in those nodes. But like, you don't have any responsibility for doing anything with that. You can just see it if you want.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Absolutely.
So I noticed you said so again. I noticed user management at the top here. I'm asking a very leading question because I know the answer, but for people who may not understand kind of what the real details of that are, what actually goes into that? I'll use the word negotiation between Red Hat and the customer in terms of IDM integration, like where the user accounts come from, grouping, things like that. How is that?
Yeah. So a lot of that is going to be standards based, whether that's SAML or OAuth or any number of other things, right? Like maybe I'm using federated services from a cloud provider, or maybe I'm using something like an Okta, right? Like I can use any of those services and have those IDPs
as the source IDP.
As the source. Yep.
Got it. Okay. And so we would work with you to configure making that access work so that you can connect to that IDP of our choice, even if that's in our own data center?
Yeah.
As long as it's a supported one, right? If you're using,
Right.
Novell NetWare from 4,000 years ago, maybe not gonna work. But
That's funny. Back in the, oh my God, like Novell NetWare 5, I had a CNE. So I'm kind of dating myself right there.
yeah,
But
hey, we've all been around the block a couple times for
yeah,
those.
that stuff like that, right, transformed into eDirectory, which ultimately
Oh
became
gosh, yeah,
something else.
yep.
And so you do have
Good old
things,
eDirectory.
yeah, you do have things like that, maybe the in the lineage, it's the great grandchild of the original directory service,
Yeah,
but the idea is that people have moved towards things like cloud identity, or
uh-huh.
SSO via SAML, or
Yeah.
using
We
OAuth and
do
all that.
we do an admin sort of operations workshop, and we switched to using a public cloud hosted provided LDAP infrastructure for the LDAP lab because we had been using the same Red Hat IDM server for like 3 years. I think it had 600 days of uptime or something like that. And I was just like waiting for the day that it was going to blow up. I don't even know that I still had the SSH key, but that little cloud instance VM just kept trugging along. And I was like, man, this is a failure waiting to happen. And so, yeah, we've definitely made it easy to integrate all these different IDPs. Does the managed, a question from one of the viewers, does the managed service add development or architectural limitations? Feel free to answer that one as you wish, and then if it doesn't meet the needs of the question, we'll circle back.
Yeah, I'd like to get a little bit more information about that question, but I wouldn't say that there are any limitations that are inherent to managed service. I mean, I think that, I think with
Well,
something like, yeah,
sure. I'll try to expand on it myself, and then Tuggy, if you want to let us know. So Eclipse Che workspaces, or if I want to do Erlang apps, like is there any, do we say like, hey, it's only Java, and as long as it's Java, or what's the deal there? And then on the
yeah.
architectural side, I guess do we deploy sort of sensibly HA wise across AZs, or what, multiple data centers, regions,
Yeah.
whatever, maybe talk about some of those things.
Yeah. So, disaster resiliency, or the ability to recover, is something that's inherent to the platform. So you can deploy the managed service, for example, into multiple availability zones, thereby making your solution more resilient. I think it's
Mhm.
still, the onus is still on you to figure out if that's going to meet your organizational objectives, but at least you have that technological choice. Like, okay,
Right.
well, yes, I
So
can.
today as a customer, you would pick a hyperscaler provider region, and then we would appropriately scale for resiliency within the availability zones provided in that region.
So yes, so you can basically say, like, do I want to have fault tolerance in my organization, or do I want high availability? Do I need, these master nodes and the worker nodes in one place because I need it to really move and perform, and I've got, that consideration, or do I want to be able to survive the failure of multiple components, right? Like whether that's the cloud provider component, the OpenShift component, or whatever. You have that kind of flexibility as well. So
Sure.
that's something that's part of the platform. And then one of the things that I think is kind of cool is you have this flexibility of languages and runtimes that you can run on top of the platform. So if you already have that stuff, bring it. If you don't, then we could introduce you to concepts like the Code Ready workspaces, where I'm able to use Code Ready workspace, which is essentially a cloud-based IDE, but I can also bring my own environment and experience. So if I'm using Eclipse, great. If I'm a VS Code kind of person, I can work with that as well. So I've got an agnostic view of the different languages and runtimes that are available.
Yeah. But from a language and runtime perspective, we via the managed services support all the same runtimes that are natively included with the product, and then in terms of the various middleware solutions
Right.
from Red Hat, application services solutions from Red Hat, like messaging and other things, those are available as well.
Yeah. So in the managed service, what you could get is the same as what you could get from the self-managed solution. And then when you're talking about like hyperscalers, Like, is there a way, there is, or I should say the phrasing on that was bad. When it comes to hyperscalers, like if there's something that I support, like through an API, I could actually be able to consume that as well. So OpenShift really extends your capability to consume services. It doesn't limit it.
Sorry, I was just typing out an answer to
Yeah.
a friend's question there. Yeah, so we got 20 minutes left, so I guess we can keep trucking along. As usual, I have interrupted you and derailed you for a solid 10 minutes.
You're fine. So this is just a real quick blurb talking about choice of region, nodes, and what the managed service is.
I swear, I've never seen these slides before.
That's right. So this is, if you remember a couple slides back, we had managed solutions that run everywhere.
Right.
IBM and Microsoft Azure, et cetera. This is specifically talking about OpenShift Dedicated. However, some of the same things apply, right? The choice of regions or the choice of the node size and AZ distribution, all that stuff. That would be true in a Microsoft environment with ARO as well.
Okay. So you're talking about the hyperscalers button for getting OpenShift versus the calling Red Hat for OpenShift Dedicated. These similar conceptual deployment methodologies apply.
That's right.
Got it.
Yeah. And then just kind of some more information, right? Talking about the operator framework. So OpenShift Dedicated is built on OpenShift 4X. So that really means that the things that you can do, again, in OpenShift container platform, the things that you've already developed, you could build the process to get that into the managed service, right? So I still have operator framework. I still have operator hub, that whole ecosystem of partners. Maybe I'm using, source code development and collaboration tools from any number of vendors. I can bring that into this environment. But I just don't have to worry about all of the details of patching and maintaining, resources.
So it's not specific to this piece, right? And we may not have a good answer for viewers today. We're doing a lot in sort of the artificial intelligence and machine learning spaces, and especially with public cloud, specialty compute hardware is available. So you have things like memory optimized, compute optimized, GPU enabled. Are we supporting all those things, some of those things with these managed services? What can you tell us about that?
So the managed service itself wouldn't necessarily run on that specialized infrastructure. But when you're talking about like the art of the possible, would it be possible to interact with a SageMaker? Is it possible to interact with a specific AI or ML service from a cloud provider? Then the answer to that is yes. Like we can.
Well, I'm actually just talking about like Amazon has the C whatever instances which are compute optimized, and then they have Azure has like NV4, which is an AMD x86 and AMD GPU combo instance. Like does the customer get to choose virtual machine instance types to support some of these workloads that require those things? The SageMaker and integration with other solutions, like that's awesome. That wasn't the question, but it's good details either way.
Okay, so not necessarily related to a AI ML service, but if you have a Jupyter notebook and you want to run a particular instance type, so you could
with a GPU or whatever.
Right, yeah, you could call on those, or like the field programmable units, right? So like, okay, I want to use a specific instance type to run the workload. And then when I'm done, I put that aside. Yeah, so you could do that. So you can call out to those types of instance types. I think what would be, in full transparency, the managed service wouldn't be doing that. That would be the managed service interacting through like the AWS operator or through the service broker to be able to call those specific instance types to run those workloads, maybe running on RHEL. But but not necessarily the managed service consuming those to run itself.
Right. So the people who own the managed service can decide if they want to offer those instances to run, to run workloads.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, the fact that we're already integrated with a cloud provider means that, you know, we can do the scaling of the instance types and et cetera. But cool. That was exactly what I was trying to figure out. Like, yeah, if we wanted to have a pool of nodes that's, you know, whatever, C4 extra large or whatever, you know, that we could actually do that. And so it sounds like the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no constraint on the types of services or technology you can use from the cloud provider that these things run on. We can work with all of those things. So yeah, you get all of our platform with, you know, all of their services and technology.
And then speaking about some of those hosted specialty services, my guess is that nothing prevents you, if you're using either OpenShift dedicated on GCP or ARO, from talking to AI services that are on IBM or AWS and so on and so forth, right? Like you,
That's
as
right.
the person who owns the dedicated service, you are letting us know what you are allowing in terms of network connectivity. And once that's figured out, you know, if you can talk to the internet, then you can talk to Amazon to use their AI service. You can talk to IBM to use their Watson service, whatever. Is that accurate?
that is accurate. So as long as you know, have a subscription to those particular technologies, and so you have an Azure account, you got an AWS account or IBM account, you can consume, or Google, you can consume those services, and you can put that as part of your workflow with the managed service or just with
yeah, and many of those hyperscalers are actually building operators that enable you from within OpenShift to order those services via, you know, custom resource instance. So yeah, it sounds like that really, you know, starts to make things interesting in terms of, like, you know, truly hybrid, best of breed, you know, run and consume whatever things you need from wherever you need them at the right time.
Yeah, that's right.
Very cool.
So I wanted to put this up really quickly, and hopefully you can see it, but this is a sample of going into the OpenShift cluster manager and just building out very quickly in AWS OpenShift dedicated. So
yeah, I mean, it looks a little small, but I realize it's a pre-recorded GIF, so, you know, that's cool. But it's just basically showing you how easy it is to pretty much like click the dedicated button and then type in a couple of things and then order a cluster, which Red Hat's managing.
Yep, that's right. So Red Hat's managing it. We provide the SRE behind the scenes, and we're responsible for keeping that up and running, or to be able to mitigate issues if it doesn't run. So really straightforward. I mean, and it puts it in such a way that, like, I can really go in and say, okay, well, I'm going to have this kind of environment. I'm going to have this long life cycle for support, and be able to understand what's all going into the platform. And now I'm going to get to building my application, or refreshing it, or modernizing, or whatever I'm doing.
Sorry, I'm typing a chat answer. So there's a question about the AWS controller for Kubernetes, which I think is their operator for Amazon Web Services. Yes, Amazon's building an operator for ordering AWS services.
Yeah. So they, in the OpenShift 3 world, they had the Open Services Broker. Yeah. And then when 4 was released, they initially had a operator, and now they've moved that operator into the open. So they've open sourced that operator, and they're encouraging other people to develop against that. But then, yes, you'll have an operator to be able to do similar to what the service broker was doing, which was to be able to provide AWS services through OpenShift directly. Of course,
yeah, the service broker initiative was, you know, basically the community decided to change direction and go the operator route. And so for the most part, the service broker was abandoned by most of the people that had started building things for it. And as far as I know, it's completely deprecated now in OpenShift 4. But again, the hyperscalers are all marching down the operator path and starting to release operators that will allow you to do the same things basically that the service broker did. So that's very
Yeah,
cool.
it's
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, it that all makes total sense. Like with the operator framework and how extensible that is, it really does provide a more universal answer than the service broker did. And then AWS is going the open source route to being able to leverage that. So I think I forget what their terminologies are, but they have like AWS Labs, they have AWS Samples, and then they have other things that are open source that they manage very closely. That's one of the things that they're going to provide leadership on as well.
Very cool. So as this looks like another different picture of something?
Yeah, so this was just showing visibility into things like the identity provider, showing the cluster and demo mode, just showing, what the customer experience would look like if they're using a managed platform. So you could be able to plug and play identity providers. In this particular case, this was GitHub. But if you were using something like GitLab or Bitbucket or something like that, you could plug that in, or Okta, or any number of other identity providers.
Yeah, and so that was the cloud.redhat.com management interface, if you will. So that's not at the actual cluster level. That's at the sort of management tool SaaS web portal that we provide, right?
That's right. Yeah, and then these are some details on the SRE, right? So the site reliability and what we're providing. So as you can see here, unlimited number of cases, different support channels, the severities. It just gives you an idea of what you're getting in a managed service. Like obviously, if you wanted to have something a bit more verbose than this, that might be a place where you would use the container platform directly and self-manage, but you would have to own those things.
Yep. Yeah. I was going to ask a question and it totally just fell right out of my head. Sorry about that.
It's all right. I've been lucky here that I haven't had a power outage or a screaming child. So
yeah,
it happens.
Do you have miserable infrastructure in your area, or is it due to weather?
Just mainly weather. There's a storm that I can't pronounce that's on the way.
Oh, so, the hurricane,
yeah. So, like I see it getting darker and darker out there, but
yeah. So for those who are up in the middle of the night in Asia, what you might call a typhoon, over here we call hurricanes, and it's our season for them right now. And so Trey is not really on the coast, but the city that he's in is close enough that sometimes the storms do affect them. I live really far inland, and sometimes they come up through Florida and hit me too, in Georgia, in Atlanta. But anyway.
Yeah. Near that airport I used to go through all the time.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how many people are going through it now, but anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, I wanted to kind of, we're wrapping up on the slides, but just there is the Forrester OpenShift dedicated study that kind of talks about what happens with managed services. But essentially, it's not magic. It takes things that aren't necessarily part of your core competency and abstracts them from you and gives them to the people that it is their core competency, allowing you to work on the things that matter to you. And for most people, Kubernetes, while being critical, isn't the most important thing that they're doing. The most important thing they do is to satisfy the mission, especially in the public sector, or to support their end user. And so that's what we're really doing, is creating business value. And this talks about that.
Sure. I don't have any more questions. I don't know what we got from the other folks on the line, so to speak. So we can pause a little bit here and see if any of our viewers have additional questions.
All right. I like this format. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, man. It's just, two guys chatting about technology.
Yeah.
It's like the tech version of Between Two Ferns in a way.
That's right.
Although neither of us appear. I do have a potted plant, but I only have one.
No.
So it's like next to one snake plant. That doesn't sound very interesting.
Yeah, I'm gonna get another fedora, put it on the opposite side, and
Yeah.
there you
There's
go.
a gentleman who is on some meetings that I'm on. He uses like a virtual camera thingy, but
Yeah.
he puts two fedoras like up in the corners, and they just sit there and hang out. So it's like his
Nice.
version of a banana head from Snapcam or whatever.
Yeah, I have noticed, like, since being here for the last 7, 8 months, however long it's been now, time's really flown. But like everyone in the background somewhere, it's like a Where's Waldo kind of thing, or maybe like a Carmen San Diego thing. It's like
Yeah.
there is a fedora somewhere.
Yeah. So there's one more question from Walid that's basically about, what other benefits there are besides more easily being able to adopt hybrid cloud and sort of outsourcing the management layer.
Mhm.
Like what other factors kind of drive them to choose us over the native Kubernetes services? And I think the big one is kind of that last one that you showed, the Forrester slide, which doesn't really explicitly say it, but just in general, like time to market, right? Because everything is integrated with
Mhm.
OpenShift. If you are just getting started or you're new to it, yes, you have to learn all the things, but you don't have to learn how to integrate all the things. So if you were to choose a particular cloud vendor and then spin up their native Kubernetes, you then have to learn how to integrate all of the other things that you want to use. And while there may be plenty of documentation, and great examples of how to do that, it's still an effort that you have to undertake, right? Like, well, okay, well, they provide a build service. Do we want to use it? Do we not want to use it? Do we want to
Right.
integrate with our existing build service or whatever? And so from my perspective, I think it's more like, you get all the value of OpenShift sort of right there, as opposed to, even though it's one cloud, it's
Mhm.
still basically a plumbing and wiring exercise, on your part.
Yeah.
Whereas we've done all that plumbing and wiring with some
I
other
also
vendors.
think, like, coming from a cloud provider, each one of those, the build service, the deploy service, they're all independently operated and they're meant to be done that way. And so one can change without the other. So
Well, they
as
have
far as
independent life cycles. Yeah.
right, so as far as integrating them, your integration may not be consistent because of a feature change in one of those. Whereas with OpenShift, it's all tested to work together, which means that in your tool chain, you have consistency. And that consistency in the tool change means I'm not changing it at
Yeah.
some
That's a good
random
point.
interval.
What
So
what happens? What happens
yeah,
when the build service API changes? And do they even guarantee backwards API compatibility? Who knows, right?
right. Yeah,
What
and
what if
you
they
don't always have
deprecate
that.
what if they deprecate the entire service? You know, so
Right.
with us at least, there's a guaranteed life cycle on these things. It's not super long because OpenShift is a fast-moving product. It's not RHEL with a 10-year guaranteed life cycle, but you've got a pretty wide window for, hey, if you start using the way that we build things, you're not going to suddenly find that you got to change that real fast.
Yeah, and I would also say to someone thinking about why OpenShift versus almost anything else is when it comes to the leadership that Red Hat has in being one of the very first champions of Kubernetes and being there on the steering committees and in the working groups and doing the work. So our version of Kubernetes is going to be very close to parity with what's actually being released in the community. And we're
Yeah.
one of the leading contributors to that effort, as opposed to whatever you get from a cloud provider that also has Kubernetes, but that's not really their core strategy. So I would look at something like that closely as well.
Yeah, very true. All righty, Trey. Well, thank you. Oh, Trey actually wants, sorry, Trey, you're Trey. Wallet wants a copy of the slides. We are still trying to figure out how to do that in a meaningful way. So yeah, Wallet, I think you know how you can contact us. We're trying to, I think we're using Speaker Deck. Chris is out today, so hopefully we'll get these slides up on Speaker Deck, but keep an eye on the OpenShift Twitter once we decide on a solution, if you will. We will. Yeah, there was an issue, I think, with SlideShare. I don't remember exactly. It looks like we might be going with Speaker Deck, but either way, we're going to do something to make the presentations that people use on our streams. We're going to make those available publicly in a way that you can easily download them. That's coming soon. Again, be on the lookout. Follow us on our social media channels, Twitter and all the other things. OpenShift website, of course, openshift.tv. And thanks very much, Trey, for your time this afternoon for me as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks to all our viewers for spending their time with us, whatever time that is for you. And we will see you next time. Again, OpenShift TV for the latest schedule. You can check out the calendar. You can actually subscribe to that calendar. It's public to find out when new stuff is coming on. And of course, follow us on Restream. Follow us on Twitch or YouTube or Facebook, or wherever it is that you're watching us. We hope to see you again soon. Ta-ta.